Hey, thanks for joining us for another episode of Get Your Fill, Financial Independence and Long Life, where we explore ways to achieve those two goals. And we invite people on who are just so rocking that exact scenario. So that is why I'm very excited to have Flint Jameson with us today. Flint, which you mightn't believe because he looks very young. I think he looks like a teenager, but I don't know if that's something.
I
He
do have
spent
a
20
baby
years
face.
in aerospace. Sorry.
I said I do have a baby face, but I'm not that young.
When I was young, people said, you'll be glad when, because I did have a baby face. And I think I don't think I look 58. I think I still have a little bit of a baby face. But people say you'll be so glad when you're 70 that you have this youthful appearance. I said, okay, sure. So Flint spent 20 years in aerospace as an engineer and program manager. And now he said, hey, that's enough of that. He's finding a path to early retirement through commercial real estate investments. Flint started his real estate endeavor with a duplex, one little duplex, something that you could do. Then he rehabbed it in 2018. And from there, he just pivoted into multifamily syndication, which we're going to really delve into because I know that that sounds like a word that sounds like the mafia. So syndication can be good. And there's so much better ability, to make great returns, and there's a lot more stability. And his portfolio, are you ready for this? So 2018, he had a 2-family, and now his portfolio is currently 1,400 units. What? Flint, thanks so much for being with us today. I am psyched that you're going to unfold this so that we can all do it too by the end of the week.
Yeah, so I want to hit back on what you just said. So it's funny as you talk about syndication sounds like this big scary word. Also, financial freedom, I've noticed to some people, and I think you probably say it a lot. Some people are like, oh, that sounds like a pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's just you're financially free. Your passive income exceeds your expenses.
Your outflow,
so
exactly.
Financially free. Syndication, to simplify it, it simply means a group of individuals pool their resources in order to achieve something larger than any individual can do by themselves.
Exactly. So you could do a 2-family, and then 2 people could do a 4-family, and then, right? I mean, just to make it really simple.
I mean, it's like you could go buy $1 million apartment complex. At this point, that would be like 6 units, but
not here. It'd only be 2 if you're lucky.
But I mean, you may not be able to afford that on your own, but you and 3 of your friends might be able to put the down payment on that, and that's technically a syndication. Yeah. And where we take this much further is we go buy $20 million worth of apartment complex, or $50 million worth of 3 apartment complexes. So yeah, it's really exciting going from that duplex to where I am now. And the reason I did that is because when I bird that duplex, have you guys talked about BRRRR?
Yeah, I'm not for a long time though. So why don't you just go over the whole meaning of it? Yeah.
It's buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. It's essentially flipping, but you hold it. So you buy something that's distressed or wholesale. Like I bought that duplex for $80,000 and put $30,000 into it, and then I rented it, and then I did a cash out refi and pocketed some money, and then I held on to it for 3 years, and I sold it 3 months ago. So
good time to sell.
Yeah, but the reason why I never moved on from there, because I realized my original intent was to just buy a whole bunch of single family homes or duplexes, quadplexes, and then eventually having enough passive income to get out of my day job. Well, I realized after doing that single BRRRR on that duplex that I would need to do 50 more units before I could even consider retiring. And that would be a considerable pay cut to where I was. So it's just where I was accepting of the passive income. That was a lot of work and a lot of capital, a ton of effort. And I was like, well, it's going to take me 25 more years to get there. And
that's not really that early of retirement at that point.
I mean, technically you can scale faster, but sometimes it depends on the economy and the success of your BRRRRs and all that, right? There's a lot of factors in it.
Yeah.
So I happened across a podcast from a big syndicator, and I was sold after that. and it totally pivoted. What a lot of people do is they'll do single family homes and they're like, oh, well, how do I make more money? I'll flip. And then they start flipping. Well, that's a lot of work. Well, maybe you can go wholesale. Well, that's still a lot of work. And then eventually it seems like the path ends at syndication. So a lot of us syndicators we all started at the single family level, and then our journeys take different paths, but we all end up at syndicators.
Yeah. The thing that I think people forget, this like flip idea, I mean, never mind that there's a lot of work, even if you don't do the work, people forget about taxes, right?
Yeah.
This is a short-term gain. I mean, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I just think people just don't realize that that's his income now, and they're going to have to pay taxes on it. So that 10 grand you make is now like 55,000. It's just like totally not worth it.
So yeah, hitting on that point, as a flipper, it's considered earned income, just like your W-2 job. And it's technically the maximum tax you will pay because it's not a long-term thing. Yeah. Where we as long-term holders, it becomes a capital gain in the end. And when you go sell, or your rents are taxed differently than your active income.
And if you sell, you don't even have to take tax because you can do a 1031 exchange.
Yeah. Or there's another strategy. In the syndication world, it gets really hard to do 1031. That's a rabbit hole that we don't need to go down. Yeah, tenant in common, it gets really complicated. But in general, syndicators typically don't do 1031s, but where we do leverage it is we'll get into what we do here in a second, but just to stay on this topic, when we sell an apartment complex, everyone gets this huge capital gain, huge profit. And what a lot of people do, because you will get taxed on that, they will immediately turn around and invest in the next deal. With commercial real estate, the tax benefits, this year alone, 100% accelerated depreciation in the first year for commercial real estate. To compare that with your single family home, you depreciate over 27 and a half years. So the value of your home divided by 27 and a half, and that's what you take as a loss on the IRS side. With commercial real estate, 100% in 1 year. So there's a huge advantage. And if you can't take advantage of it, like the depreciation and the loss is so big, it'll carry over year until you burn that down.
So this is the big reveal is that all the people who are making these rules, they all own real estate.
Yes, that is so very true. What? Yes. Yeah, you got to play the game that's dealt, right? And the people, the lawmakers own real estate, and it benefits them. The other thing, though, the reason they make it advantageous on the commercial real estate side is because you're helping the economy. Whatever commercial real estate asset it is, you could be doing industrial, you could be doing retail, right? It is a economy building thing. Building apartment complexes, you're bringing a ton of people in. So they do want to give it some tax advantage. And so this year alone, it's 100% depreciation. Next year, it'll be 80% depreciation in the first year. And then it'll be 60-40. And then at some point, the tax law will change again and probably crank it back up.
But yeah, because they're trying to stimulate the economy, right? There's all these empty places because of COVID. Lots of people went out of business, and they don't want these places to sit. So here you go. Here's a carrot,
Yeah.
Awesome. So tell me how you first, did you climb into someone else's syndicate or did you start your own?
It is a team sport through and through. I think I've heard of one person that's done their own, but when it takes the effort it takes to find an apartment complex, underwrite it, do the due diligence inspections, earnest money down, right? You can imagine for $1 million plus how much earnest money, and then asset managing, capital raising, it all takes a team. So typically what we do is we'll partner up with each other, whether it's partner up and form one entity, or like me as Vestus Capital, I'm solo at Vestus Capital, that's just my thing. But I go off and I partner with a whole bunch of very experienced operators. I develop a relationship over a year with these guys. I will only bring my investors to operators that I trust and that I have met, because the investors are the most important thing.
So you have your investors, but then you bring them to a place where they're the ones that are finding the opportunities.
Yeah. So these operators, really, I help out as well. Like I do some asset management. So I capital raise and I do some asset management. I'm doing some underwriting now with another group of people, right? So there's a lot of partnerships involved. But yes, we all kind of have our own database of investors, and we all love to bring people to deals. Starts off with friends and family when you're a newbie, and then it starts exploding from there.
Because this is something that I don't think people understand, right? When you're sitting there and you're in a place where you don't have a lot, right? This mindset of lack or not, not quite enough to that, you have no idea how many people that you probably already know who have a shit ton of money that are looking for good places to invest it, right? I mean, was that a surprise to you?
I think because I walked down that road originally, I became a passive investor. Actually, a lot of us who are active general partners are passive investors too. That's the holy grail. If I could be 100% passive and not have to do any work, right? That's the goal. But we realize in going down this path that there is even money that we have. You don't have to invest out of your savings account. You can invest your old 401k from a previous company. You convert that to a solo 401k or EQRP, and it's basically checkbook control, and you invest into alternative assets. You can do the same thing with self-directed IRAs. So if you have an IRA, turn it into self-directed. A lot of people have money parked somewhere. They just don't realize how they can tap into it and utilize it. There's also HELOC in your home. I love the equity in your home. So if you have equity in your home and you aren't doing anything with it, there's no ROI. It doesn't mean anything unless you're planning on selling your home and buying another home, right? If you plan on sitting on the equity in your home, you put it to work.
Yeah.
I mean, I have like a 4% interest on a HELOC right now, and I'm getting 15% returns when I invest it. So it's either debt equity or put it to work and make more money for you.
And that's, this is something that a lot of people also don't realize there's this thing, this like, oh, like my house is paid off. Yay. But okay. And then what, right? That is just wasted. It's money that's wasted. It's like putting it under your mattress, right? It's okay, good. I'm glad we touched on that.
So I hit that a lot. I leveraged my HELOC a lot. I bought the duplex with my HELOC, and then I ended up turning around paying it off, and then I turn around and buying something else with it. So, and the benefit with a HELOC is it's money in your pocket now versus your retirement accounts. You still have to keep it isolated, and you still can't touch it until you reach that magic age of 59 and a half.
Yeah.
So I am a huge proponent of putting your money to work now, because you can retire when you're 45 or 50 or 55. You don't have to wait till that magic date that the government defined is your retirement date.
Yeah, exactly. And that the Social Security date keeps getting pushed off. Now you have to be
what is that? That's
65.
Like, well, this is the other scary part. So, okay, I've been talking a lot about personal finances lately and really diving into those retirement accounts. So those retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, the rules are written by the government, and similar to Social Security, if they think that the workforce or they need to keep money in the institutions longer, they can change that 59 and a half to 62 or 63. And for those younger individuals out there, you're cranking money in there, right? I did it. You probably did it. Just think about in 30 years from now, that date could change, and you are socking money away that you won't be able to touch until the government lets you. So we could go on a rabbit trail about how investing in 401s is probably not the most beneficial thing, as long as you are very smart with investing that money if you don't put it in a 401.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's not go down the hole, because we could get started on, how people don't even know they're invested in their 401ks. They have no clue what's happening in there. Like,
yes.
Go there.
And to be honest, just to drop this nugget for people, the company match doesn't result in that much value in the long run. There's math out there. I just want to plant that seed. Go do the research on your own, because I did that research for almost 3 months, and then I finally figured it out, and I said, what have I been doing? And I immediately shut off my 401. So, but
So
back to
good. So now you have,
syndications.
yeah, lots of things to think about now, lots of research to do. Okay. So Flint, tell me, like, tell us all, so we totally understand the difference between what, you're in a syndicate that's passive versus, you're doing the same basic thing, but it's active. So
Yeah.
what kind of activities?
So let's just break down what we do in general.
Yeah.
For a multifamily, a apartment complex, the business plan we build around it is to flip it. And I'm going to compare this to single family home because that's what everybody understands.
Yep.
So we essentially flip an apartment building, but it takes us 5 years to do it. So on a 100-unit apartment complex, we will shut down 5 units or 10 units at a time, roughly, because economies of scale, bring in a contractor and they will renovate 10 units at a time while we keep 90% of the other units occupied. So we're still cash flowing. So you, as an investor who actually owns equity in the property, as if you own it, you will get cash flow throughout those 5 years. And when we renovate those units, we crank the rents. When we finish, bump the revenue. And at the end, it's just like a house flip. You've taken this older house and made it new, and now the value of that house is much higher. We do the exact same thing. However, the exciting part about commercial real estate is it's valued not based on comparables. Like, what did your neighbor sell their house for? Thus, my house is worth this much. Commercial real estate is a revenue generating machine. Thus, the value of the property is based on the revenue, the net operating income of that property.
Right. So what Flynn is saying is, when you increase the amount of rent that you're getting, which you just did by fixing up all the units, now you're getting probably a great percentage higher. So now there's like a multiplier that adds to the value of the property. So, you fix up your house, you put a new kitchen in, yeah, great. Maybe now you've added a fraction of the price that it took you to make that new kitchen. But when you're talking about commercial real estate, and commercial real estate is more than 4 units. So you might think commercial unit has to be like a store, but it doesn't. A commercial is just 5 or more units. And then you take that property and you're getting more cash flow, then it becomes a multiplier. So you might take a property that you got for $1 million and give me some numbers, Flint, just like.
So I was just thinking about this. I'm going to pull out my calculator really quick because public math is very hard, but this is a very simple equation. If you guys have a piece of paper in front of you, write this down. The value of the property equals net operating income divided by cap rate. Now we can go into cap rate here in a second, but it's a percentage. So typically, if I were to add $1 of net operating income, that is revenue minus expenses, and I divide that by, say, a 4.5 cap rate, I just added $22 of value with $1 of income. So to put it simply, cap rate is, I call it, it's kind of like a normalizer for, it depends, like in Denver where I live, Denver's cap rate's probably 3.5 to 4% or something. And as Denver grows and becomes a bigger, more booming economy, that cap rate actually gets smaller and smaller. So if you do the math in that simple equation, as wherever you buy, if that economy is booming over that 5 years, that cap rate gets smaller, and then it just skyrockets your value that you put in. So in that scenario, $1 equated to $22 of value. So if you put that in the millions term, investors are very happy. And that's how we build our business strategy around doubling your money in 5 years.
And you can see how that can easily happen. It's not like a pyramid scheme, right? It's not some Ponzi scheme. It's true. And because of this multiplier, so ROI, or net operating income and cap rate, these are all things that people like. Cap rate especially it's what Flint was saying, it's a normalizer. So if you're thinking of investing in one property over here and one property over here, and they're all completely different business models, one's a mall and one's a multi-unit apartment building, you can use that cap rate to compare apples and oranges and pears and all other fruit, all in there together.
And every market has a different cap rate. Like smaller towns might have a 6% cap rate. So
Well, and it has to do with the risk as well. So if I'm going to buy something in a neighborhood that's not as good and has higher vacancies, I want to get a bigger cap rate than if I'm going right
Correct.
downtown and there's like no chance
Yeah.
I'm ever going to have an empty unit, right?
Yeah. So typically what we do is we underwrite when we find an apartment, we will underwrite the whole deal for the 5-year plan. Like how much renovation, we'll go in and do the due diligence and inspections. And this is like your single family home. You pay an inspector to go in there and review. So like on 100 or 300 unit, you could have a team of inspectors going through every single unit, marking in their little iPads. Here's what needs to be fixed. And we'll cost that out. And then we will legitimately say, well, we need $1.5 million to renovate this place. We're going to renovate it over the next 24 months, et cetera. And then we put this pro forma together with rent increases and whatnot. And we put a super conservative underwriting together. And the target is a 15% average return year over year, or double your money, however you want to look at the number.
But when it's doubling your money, you're actually doubling the total, right? I mean, are you doubling your actual money, or are you doubling the value of everything?
You're doubling your actual money. So if you
Okay.
invest $100,000 in that 5 years, you will walk back out with 200. I mean, that's your $100,000 back plus an additional 100K.
Yeah. Right. So I was just asking because sometimes like when I do my, my little personal like house flips for myself, like the same thing. I go and I live there for a couple of years while I'm fixing it up. And then I want to, if I bought it for 100,000 and I put 50 in, I want to walk away with 300,000, even though the value, I bought the house for 100,000, but I didn't put 100,000 down. Right. So that's what I meant by that. Is it like,
oh, yeah. So the other thing we do buy, it's similar to a home. When we buy an apartment complex, we go get lending of 70 to 80% of the loan to value, just like you do with your house. But when you're buying a $20 million apartment complex, that, we still have to put that 20 to 30% down. And that is a ton of money. And that's where the limited partners come in, who are the investors. Yeah. So they bring the money. We do all the sweat equity. I mean, we bring money too, because we love making money.
And who doesn't?
and then yeah. And we have skin in the game when we bring money to it.
Yeah. And investors like to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the equity split. So we all come in with ownership. We give 70 to 80% of the equity to the investors. And then us general partners take that 20 to 30. And then it's all deal dependent.
Yeah. Have there been any, what is there like a situation or a transaction or something that really like surprised you in some way?
I think every transaction is unique, especially like right now with the economy doing its thing. Stock market's plummeting. We're in this recession. Interest rates are climbing. This is where we are always constantly changing our strategy in order to find a deal that will shake out and pencil and still get you your 15% return.
Yeah.
So this current fund that we are closing on soon, it's total of 792 units, 3 different properties, 3 different states. It's one investment and you get 3 different properties. And all 3 of those properties are different asset types and different business models. It's really cool.
Yeah.
But when we started the raise back in May and the stock market started plummeting, investors started freaking out, right? 2008 is very fresh in our minds.
Oh, yeah.
2008 was a very real estate heavy hit. However, so it's on us as general partners and capital raisers to educate the world that we are not in a 2008 scenario.
Right.
Real estate right now, all my investments, now it's 1,400 or 15, whatever it is, those are all doing phenomenally well. Because the difference between 2008, there was an oversupply of homes and banks were getting very liberal with their lending. In this scenario, neither of those 2 things are happening. So we keep talking about, is there a bubble? Is there a bubble? Well, it's probably not going to be a bubble because the housing supply is so far behind the demand.
Yeah.
That even single family homes, if there is a quote unquote bubble, it's going to be a softening, as in it'll shift a little bit more towards the buyer's market. But because the demand is so outpaced on supply, I don't think there's going to be much of a dip. It'll be more even keel between seller and buyer. And then it's going to skyrocket back up again. So, and then commercial property kind of follows a different trend. We have multifamily. When people can't afford a house, where do they go? Right into an apartment.
Rates are up. Oops, I better go back to my renter.
Right. So we're in a very, it's a very interesting thing. As the economy gets better, people start moving out of apartments, but there's always lower income people that, or I mean, homeless people maybe even move into those class C apartments, right? There's class A, B, and C, A being the best, B middle, and C is the lower. And you kind of have this wave that moves up and down as the economy moves up and down. So as we purchase A and B class assets, heck, we purchase C assets and turn them into Bs when we renovate them. So it's really stable throughout.
Yeah, people always need a place to live. And I think that the key to that too is a small investor might get him or herself over leveraged and they have to try to keep rents high because they can't make their numbers and stuff. But if you've got, you're not trying to make your whole living from 6 units. Right?
Correct.
You can absorb a vacancy, you can keep things nicer and fix them up. And, we're not going to put the 25th coat of paint on those cabinets just to like try to get somebody in there. Right. I mean, it's a whole other mindset,
Yeah, you hit a great point. If we have a 100-unit apartment and one person moves out, we are at 99% occupancy.
Exactly.
Single family home, that one person moves out, and if it takes you a month to turn it and find someone, you're down a whole month, and it might take you a year just to break even.
Yeah, exactly. So, and if you can't afford to lower your rent, I started off my real estate career in rentals, and you'd be talking to an owner, and I'd be like, someone wants to offer you $75 less a month for the apartment. Oh no, I can't do that. I'm thinking to myself, if you're vacant for 1 month, it's going to take you 10 months just to make up that $75 that I mean? It's like, it makes no sense to me. It just makes no sense to me, but whatever.
When you have a lot of apartments, you have a lot more liberty to play with it and push the rents. Actually, to give you an example, so I keep going 100 units. We bought 104 units in Augusta, Georgia in February. We closed on it. Within 3 months, we are now at year 4 pro forma target rents. Like as I said, in the underwriting, we plan out 5 years on this pro forma. And I think in the first month we said, hey, let's try year 3. Just try it. Because we can handle that one unit that's not filled for a little bit. Right. Sure enough, actually, I think that was a renewal. Someone renewed at year 3. And so then we're like, well, that worked. Let's try year 4. Now we have a whole bunch at year 4. And we just barely got started renovating. So, I mean, we are already exceedingly outperforming on the rents, and we're only 3 to 4 months in.
So first, let's talk about like your whole mental process. How was it for you? Like, how did you go kind of mentally, or how did you learn or whatever, like to go from, doing a flip on a BRRRR on a 2-unit building to all of a sudden, I just bought 104 units, not even in my time zone. Okay. I mean, how did you go there? So I think people are saying like, he lives in Colorado and he just bought a place in Georgia. I mean, that I would be afraid. I wouldn't have, did you personally walk through every unit? Right. I mean, how do people get to this place where they can grasp this?
It's funny because my duplex was actually in Milwaukee. So that was also a remote thing. To be honest, everyone learns differently. And I got into it through podcasts because every night I would walk my dog and I would digest. It was Bigger Pockets was the first thing I did. Yeah. And that's kind of where I said, all right. It must have been 6 months before I took action, because just inherently, I feel like I need to understand every little piece.
You're an engineer. When you're, give yourself some slack, man.
Yeah, it's true. But once I pivoted, and once again, syndications, I digested probably for another 6 months of podcasts. And then I finally took action and bought into a program. There's a lot of programs out there. If you're really looking to be a GP, there's people that offer education. There's boot camps, there's online courses, webinars, however you want to digest. There's books, there's so many books.
Yeah.
Choose your path. But when it comes to wanting to be a general partner, the active investor like myself, you don't need to understand every little bit. I think it's good to know from a high level, really the whole process, but you can digest that in a very short amount of time. You need to choose because it's a partnership. It is a team sport, right? And that's actually part of the fun. That's why it's way more fun than doing a duplex by myself. Right. Because everyone in this industry that I partner with are incredible people that are just super driven and very positive. And it just gives me energy. So choose what you think you would like to do. Like if you're great at spreadsheets and math, become an underwriter, dive into that, but take action immediately, right? You don't need to wait 6 months or then 9 months. And I mean, by the time my first deal happened, it was way down the road. I could have taken action so much sooner had I dialed myself into one thing and started doing partnerships. And to be honest, once you educate yourself to a given level, go to conferences. There's like 100 conferences a year on multifamily syndications or just syndicating in general. Go there, network with people, learn. That's where the relationships are built. And then it's amazing. Serendipity takes place. The puzzle pieces start falling together, and next thing you know, you get invited on to help with the next 100-unit, 200-unit apartment complex.
And I think a big part of this, right, is the trust factor.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
The people who you're working with, that you just, you don't need to know every little thing that they're doing because you trust that they know what they're doing.
Yeah. And to be honest, I ended up, the first people that I partnered with, I watched them for a year. And I had actually talked to them like the year before. I was like, hey, you guys seem cool. And then I kind of watched them. And I wish I had invested with them because one of the units, rather than that 5-year plan, they met that mark in 18 months, doubled the money in 18 months. Their rate of return was 125% or something like that. I'm just like, I mean, I'm honored that they invited me on to work with them, but I'm kicking myself because they were delivering unit after unit after unit as I was just watching them from afar before I joined in.
But it's okay.
Yeah, it's totally cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So what kinds of things do you get questions from people who are just starting this, like trying to understand it all? Any questions that you can think of that come up a lot that we haven't already talked about?
I think from a passive investor standpoint, you hit all of the main points. It's just really understanding what the heck do we do at the high level. Yeah. A lot of times we'll get questions on lending, right? As the interest rates go up. And really the simple answer is we target a given return and we underwrite to it. What most people don't know behind the scenes is on average, we will underwrite 100 properties before that one property lands in our lap. Or 100 properties, maybe 15 of those will be worth putting an offer in on. But then out of those 15, we will only get one offer accepted. Yeah. So there is a ton of legwork behind the scenes. And actually, maybe that's where the fees come in. People like to ask, well, how do we make money? Well, one, we get 20 to 30% of the equity of the ownership. And two, there are fees. There's an acquisition fee, which is on the order of 2 to 3%. It's because it takes up to 400 hours. The 100 units in Augusta, there was 400 hours worth of effort just to make that deal happen. So we kind of want to get paid for all our work, right? Then there's asset management, because there's a lot of work just to keep the thing running. We hire property managers. We make sure property managers are performing. We talk to them weekly. And then we have to talk to general contractors, right? We are doing all of that work. And so we collect asset management fees throughout.
Which is, I mean, if you've ever had to work with a general contractor, you can't pay people enough.
Yeah.
It's easier when you have a nice big job like that, right? Trying to get somebody to come to your house is like a nightmare, but
Yes. It gets easier, yeah, because you have a lot more money and it's economies of scale, and you can hopefully keep them focused.
exactly.
That's their only job, 10 unit after 10 unit after 10 unit for the next 24 months. But I mean, we still see the same pains, right? The cost of a 2x4 has gone up, and right. So we plan for reserves, we plan for rainy day, we underwrite super conservative so we can brace ourselves for the worst, because we know it's not if something's going to happen, it's when. And fires, I mean, this partnership I was talking about, they've had 8 units catch on fire that are getting rebuilt. Insurance covers that, which is cool. The other cool part is insurance actually covers the loss in rent. So investors are like, what fire? There's been a couple shootings. So here's a crazy part. Yeah, you go buy a Class C property, you renovate it into a Class B, you put a fence up around it, gated access, all of a sudden it becomes a secure gated community, and you get a totally different clientele that's in there. But no kidding, while they just acquired the place, they're putting a security system in right out of the gate, like in month 1, a shooting happened. And that's happened twice to them, right? But the other fun part I should mention is we change communities. So the one example, I wish I was part of the deal, but they actually had the chief of police call them up and say, hey, could you buy the next 2 or 3 apartment complexes? Because we have actually seen a noticeable decrease in the amount of crime since you've taken over that one property. So now, yeah, gated community, you put in a playground, you get a different clientele, families feel safe, the crime rate has dropped. You've just made a positive impact on the community. And actually we make positive impact on tenants. That's their home.
Yeah.
They like a nicer home.
Right,
so
exactly. And they're more likely to stay. And that's less work for you too, right?
Exactly.
Less vacancy, less work. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's so fulfilling, right? Because we get reviews from tenants that's, hey, thank you. I love what you did with the landscaping and the upgrading of something, right? And it just makes us feel good.
Nice. Awesome. Flint, I loved talking with you. This has been good. And I hope that y'all listeners found it helpful to kind of understand and unpack the whole concept of syndicates a little bit more than we did when we talked to Amy Silvis. But what else, Flint, what else? Is there some question you wish I would have asked you? Or is there something that's like on the tip of your tongue that you really want to talk about? And I just haven't
maybe. So syndication isn't just multifamily buildings. Self-storage is an exciting thing. Self-storage has actually outperformed multifamily. I will probably do one of those. We can syndicate those. We can syndicate a lot of things. There's people doing commercial office space. But what's exciting, one, we're doing the fund with the 3 properties. And then my next exciting thing is build to rent, where we are doing new development communities, building these starter homes. We basically buy land and build 140 starter homes for this particular plot of land.
Wow.
It is, as it said, built to rent. So we will have this thing that feels like a Class A apartment complex with all the amenities, property management, clubhouse, but rather than apartments, it's single family homes. So all of those younger millennials or zennials looking to start families, get out of apartments and have a single family home, but can't afford, right? That's all.
Or don't want. I mean, there is a whole mindset of people who just, I don't want to be tied down. I don't want to buy anything. I just want to continue to rent.
Absolutely. So we are getting started on that this year, and we should be cutting ground hopefully in the fall. The return profile is way different. It's like a 24-month return profile versus the 5 years. And the other exciting thing is, because the supply problem in the US is so far behind the demand, they're saying it'll take almost 10 years to get the supply back to meet the demand. So we're just kind of helping that out by building 100 units there, 200 units. So I'm just so excited it's just a new project, and then we can syndicate it as well. We can bring investors along for the ride.
Awesome. Awesome. So what if somebody wanted to get involved in being part of a syndicate, not like to do any work, but just to be a passive investor?
Be the passive investor. Yeah. The limited partner. Contact us, really. That's the first step is, vestuscapital.com. You can see, join the investor club. All of us syndicators have clubs, or I guess we all call them clubs, but it's really get in. You need to be in our database. We are totally driven by the SEC. We are protected. The LPs are protected by the Securities and Exchange Commission. All of our documents are written by an SEC attorney, right? We follow the law, and to follow the law, we need to make sure, as investors get in, we build a relationship with them. So the first step is sign up on the investor portal and then get on a call with us, and we'll talk with you, because not everyone's fit for this type of investment. But the other thing is, typically our minimums are $50,000.
Yeah, and that's very reasonable.
Yeah.
I have, $452.75, and I'd like to get involved in your syndicate. Like, okay, we just need 1 million people like you, and we'll be in good shape.
Right.
No,
yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. If you don't have $50,000, but you want real estate, there's always the REITs. You can go into Fidelity and get into a real estate investment trust.
But look around, right? You don't have to have it in your checking account.
Exactly.
Like you were saying earlier, Flint, look in your 401k, look in your IRA, is there a way that you can leverage that money to make an actual return instead of whatever you're making it with your little, what you have in your company stock portfolio or whatever.
Yeah. A lot of people just have $50,000 in some stock or mutual fund that they can extract and put somewhere else.
Yeah. And real estate compared to a mutual fund, there's just really no comparison.
Yes, exactly. There's tax benefits. It's like you actually own the property, but you're not doing any work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, cool. Well, Flint, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you, listener, for listening. I know you got some wheels are turning from listening to Flint. So why don't you share this episode with a friend, and maybe you can invest together and get your whole financial freedom hat on and figure out how you can cut the ties to your employer.
Yeah. Get out of the rat race.
Exactly. Get out of the rat race. Awesome. All right. And thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.